Hello friends, welcome back. First of all, tell me where in the world you're watching my video from. The driveway was already swallowed by shadow when Harrison Cole pulled his car to a stop. The dashboard clock glowed 6:30 p.m. in tired red numbers, and the October sky over Evanston felt heavier than it should have. 52 years old, he thought absently, loosening his tie. Lately, every year seemed to sit on his shoulders a little longer than the last. He stepped out of the car, the chill biting through his coat, and listened. Nothing. No television murmuring from the living room. No footsteps upstairs. No familiar sounds of a child moving through the house. Just stillness, the kind that didn't feel peaceful, only wrong. "Sophie," he called as he unlocked the front door. "I'm home, sweetheart." His voice echoed back to him, unanswered. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and something stale beneath it. Harrison set his briefcase down and followed the quiet toward the kitchen. That's where he found her. Sophie sat at the table with her math homework spread neatly in front of her, pencil resting between her fingers. Her back was rounded, shoulders slumped, her small hands pressed flat against the paper as if holding herself in place. She wasn't writing. She wasn't even looking at the page. She was staring straight ahead, eyes unfocused, like she was somewhere else entirely. "Hey, kiddo," Harrison said softly. "How was school?" She blinked, as if his voice had to travel a long way to reach her. "Fine." Just one word. Flat. Hollow. That had become the pattern. For 2 weeks now, his bright, talkative 10-year-old had been slipping away from him in small, unsettling ways. Sophie used to greet him with stories the moment he walked through the door, about classmates, teachers, something funny that happened on the playground. Now, she spoke like every word cost her energy she didn't have. He watched her closely. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath her eyes. Her face looked paler than usual, almost gray. More than once, he'd come home to find her asleep on the couch in the middle of the afternoon, backpack still on the floor, shoes kicked off wherever she'd collapsed. When she woke, she always looked confused, disoriented, like she wasn't sure where she was, or how much time had passed. Harrison had asked Audrey about it. "She's growing," his wife had said with a shrug. "Kids get tired." But this wasn't tired. This was something else. He moved to the fridge, pulled out chicken, and set it on the counter. "Want me make dinner?" Sophie shook her head without lifting her eyes. "I'm not hungry." The words landed heavy between them. Harrison turned off the stove before it could heat, then crossed the room and sat beside her. The chair scraped softly against the tile. "Sophie," he said gently, "talk to me. What's going on?" Her fingers tightened around the pencil. Her lip trembled. Tears welled up in her eyes. And when she spoke, her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "Dad, can I stop taking the pills Mom gives me?" The world seemed to tilt. "What pills?" Harrison asked, his voice steady even as his heart slammed hard against his ribs. "The vitamins," she said quickly, like she was afraid she'd already said too much. "Mom says they're vitamins." His stomach tightened. "What kind of vitamins?" "I don't know." Sophie wiped at her eyes. "She's only given them to me a few times, but every time I take one, I get really sleepy. Like I can't keep my eyes open. Then I sleep for hours. And when I wake up, my head feels fuzzy. Weird." The word echoed in his head. "Weird. When did this start?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "About 2 weeks ago. The first time was on a Saturday, when you went to the office. Mom said it would help me focus better. But I just crashed. I slept until dinner." Harrison felt a cold pressure settle in his chest. Audrey had never mentioned vitamins. Never said Sophie was taking anything. Not once. "How many times has she given them to you?" he asked. Sophie counted on her fingers slowly. 4. Maybe 5. Not every day. Just sometimes. When she's home, and you're not. The last part landed like a punch. "Can you show me the bottle?" he asked carefully. Sophie nodded and slipped out of her chair, padding upstairs. Harrison stayed where he was, his hands clenched together, forcing his breathing to stay even. This had to be nothing. A misunderstanding. A harmless supplement. Audrey wouldn't. Sophie came back down holding a small plastic bottle in both hands. She placed it in his palm like it was fragile, dangerous. It was plain white. No label. No brand. Just a strip of masking tape stuck to the side, with a single word written in Audrey's neat handwriting. "Vitamins." Harrison unscrewed the cap. Inside were small white tablets, round and unmarked. His throat went dry. "Dad." Sophie's voice cracked. "Am I in trouble?" "No," he said quickly, pulling her into his arms. "No, baby. You did exactly the right thing. I'm proud of you for telling me." She clung to him, her arms tight around his neck. He held her like that for a long moment, staring over her shoulder at the bottle still sitting open on the table. Inside his head, one thought screamed louder than all the others. What is Audrey doing to our daughter? Harrison didn't sleep that night. The bottle sat on the kitchen counter, a small white cylinder that seemed to glow under the dim light. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sophie's face, pale, exhausted, lost. "Every time I take one, I get so sleepy, Dad." At 3 a.m, he gave up and made coffee he didn't drink. He just sat at the table, staring at the pills like they might start explaining themselves. Audrey came home late, around 10, moving through the house with her usual ease. She kissed his cheek, asked about Sophie, went upstairs to check on her. Harrison said nothing. By 6 a.m., the moment the hospital appointment line opened, he was dialing. "I need to bring my daughter in today," he said. "It's urgent." "What's the nature of the emergency?" the operator asked. "I think she's been given something," he replied. "A drug. I need her tested." They squeezed them in at 8:30. He woke Sophie gently, smoothing her hair as she blinked up at him. "Dad, it's early." "I know, sweetheart. We're going to see a doctor." Fear flickered across her face. "Am I in trouble?" "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "I just need to make sure you're safe." Audrey was in the shower when they left. Harrison wrote a short note and placed it on the counter. "Taking Sophie to doctor. Explain later." He didn't trust himself to say more. The drive was quiet. Sophie sat in the passenger seat, clutching her backpack, staring out the window. Harrison wanted to promise her everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. Dr. Monica Foster met them in the pediatric wing. She had sharp eyes and a calm voice that didn't soften what she was hearing. "This bottle isn't labeled," she said after examining it. "We need a toxicology screen immediately." Harrison watched through the glass as a nurse drew blood from Sophie's arm. She didn't cry. She just looked away, jaw set, brave in a way that broke his heart. 45 minutes felt like a lifetime. When Dr. Foster finally came back, she was holding a printout. Her expression was grim. "Mr. Cole," she said carefully, "your daughter has high levels of diphenhydramine in her system." The word barely registered. "It's an antihistamine," she continued, "commonly found in adult sleep aids. In children, especially at these doses, it causes severe drowsiness, confusion, and with repeated use." She paused. "Possible cognitive damage." The room tilted. "Someone has been giving your daughter adult sedatives," she said quietly. Harrison swallowed hard. "Her mother." Dr. Foster went very still. "We need to talk about next steps," she said. As Harrison drove home, Sophie slept in the back seat, curled against the door. He watched her in the rearview mirror, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. One question clawed at him, relentless and unforgiving. Why? The first thing Harrison did after dropping Sophie off at Judith's house was sit alone in his car and breathe. Not shallow breaths, not rushed ones. Slow, deliberate pulls of air into his lungs, the way Dr. Foster had once instructed him during a stress seminar years ago. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. It didn't help. His hand still shook when he turned the key and drove away from his mother-in-law's neat little bungalow. He had smiled for Sophie, lied gently, told her she'd have more fun baking cookies and watching movies with Grandma. She believed him, or at least pretended to. He hated himself for that part. But Sophie was safe. That was all that mattered now. The house felt different the moment he stepped back inside. Empty. Colder. Like it no longer recognized him. Harrison stood in the living room and took it in. The gray sectional Audrey had insisted on buying, the coffee table where Sophie usually did her homework, the framed photographs lining the wall. Their wedding day. Sophie's first birthday. A summer trip to Michigan where Audrey had laughed into the camera, sun in her hair, eyes bright. 12 years of marriage. 10 years of parenthood. Had it all been a performance? He forced himself to move. The small device he'd bought sat in his pocket, heavier than it had any right to be. A security camera disguised as a phone charger. Discreet. Invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. He unplugged the lamp near the couch and replaced it, angling it carefully. The app flickered to life on his phone. Crisp image. Clear audio. Everything. From the driveway, he stared at the house that had once felt like a sanctuary. His phone buzzed. Audrey, leaving work early today. Want me to grab dinner? His thumb hovered before typing. Harrison, sure. That'd be great. Audrey, perfect. See you soon. Love you. The words made his stomach churn. Monday morning, he kissed her goodbye like nothing was wrong. She smiled up at him, still in her robe. You're working from home today, right? Yeah, she said. Presentation to finish. He left the house, drove 2 blocks, and parked behind a coffee shop. Then he opened the app. The living room was empty at first. Time crawled. At 8:30, Audrey appeared on screen. She was dressed, not in comfortable clothes, but in something fitted, intentional. Makeup done. Hair styled. She sat on the couch, scrolling her phone, smiling at messages Harrison would never see. At 11:45, the doorbell rang. Audrey checked her reflection, smoothed her hair, and opened the door. A man stepped inside. Tall, dark-haired, familiar. Harrison's breath caught. Gavin Pierce. He watched them embrace. Not like co-workers, not like friends. Like lovers. Wine at noon. Laughter. A hand on a knee that didn't move away. Then the kiss. Audrey kissed him back. Harrison turned the screen black, his heart pounding so hard he thought he might pass out. The truth slammed into him. Merciless. While he was protecting Sophie, Audrey had been destroying their family. The days that followed blurred together. Gavin returned. Again. And again. Harrison saved everything. He found the bank statements next. Cash withdrawals. Hotels. Restaurants he'd always wanted to take Audrey to. Jewelry. Money meant for Sophie. Spent on betrayal. By the time he sat in Janet Pierce's office downtown, Harrison's grief had hardened into resolve. You have an airtight case, the attorney said after reviewing everything. Full custody. Favorable asset division. When do we serve her? She asked. Not yet, Harrison replied. I want her mother to see what she's done. I want her to face it. Janet nodded. Call me when you're ready. He was ready sooner than he thought. When Audrey opened the door and saw Harrison standing there with Judith beside him, the color drained from her face. And when Gavin fled and the truth spilled out, there was no undoing it. You drugged Sophie, Harrison said, his voice cold. Judith's sob cut through the room. I'll testify against you, she told her daughter, devastated. Sophie deserves better. Audrey collapsed, begging. Harrison didn't look back when he walked out. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, a sterile kind of cleanliness that felt designed to drain emotion from the room. Outside, December pressed against the windows in shades of gray, the sky low and unforgiving. Harrison sat at the long wooden table beside Janet Pierce, his hands folded, his back straight, his face composed in a way he barely recognized. Across the aisle, Audrey sat with her attorney. She looked smaller than he remembered, thinner, as if the life had been pulled from her frame one quiet lie at a time. Her hair hung loose around her face, unstyled, dark circles bruising the skin beneath her eyes. She never once looked at Harrison, not when the judge entered, not when her name was called, not even when the case file, their life, reduced to pages and exhibits, was opened on the bench. Judge William Hartley adjusted his glasses and began reading. This is a dissolution of marriage, he said evenly, with a petition for full custody of the minor child, Sophie Cole, age 10. The words echoed, formal and final. Janet stood and presented the evidence piece by piece, her voice steady, professional, impossible to argue with. The toxicology report, the doctor's statement, the videos, the financial records. Each document landed with quiet weight, stacking one truth on top of another until there was nowhere left for Audrey to hide. Then Judith took the stand. Harrison felt something twist in his chest as his former mother-in-law swore the oath. She looked older than she had just 2 months ago, grief etched into the lines of her face. But her voice didn't shake. My daughter endangered my granddaughter, Judith said plainly. I support Mr. Cole's request for full custody. Audrey's attorney didn't cross-examine her. There was nothing left to ask. Judge Hartley closed the file and spoke. The marriage is dissolved, he said. Mr. Cole is awarded full legal and physical custody of Sophie Cole. Ms. Cole is granted supervised visitation once per month. Assets will be divided equally. Ms. Cole will compensate Mr. Cole $17,000 for dissipation of marital funds. The gavel struck. It was over. Harrison signed the final papers outside the courtroom. His hand didn't shake this time. Janet rested a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. He nodded, though the victory felt quiet. Heavy. Necessary, but not triumphant. A week later, a realtor walked through the Evanston house with a clipboard and a polite smile. She took photos of the living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms, rooms that had once been full of laughter and bedtime stories and ordinary happiness. The house sold in 3 days. Harrison felt no sadness packing boxes, only exhaustion. Every corner carried ghosts. He was ready to leave them behind. The apartment in Lincoln Park was smaller but brighter. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, sunlight pouring into every room. On moving day, Sophie stood in the middle of her new bedroom while Harrison finished setting up her desk. "Is this really ours?" she asked. He knelt in front of her. "Yes. A fresh start." She wrapped her arms around his neck. "I feel safe here." The words settled deep in his chest, anchoring him. 6 months passed. Spring arrived softly, almost apologetically, as if the city itself knew what they'd endured. Trees budded green along the sidewalks. The air warmed. Sophie grew lighter. Her laughter came easier now. Her eyes were bright again. They walked home from school one afternoon, Sophie talking animatedly about an art project, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Dad," she said after a moment, quieter now, "is it bad that I don't miss her?" Harrison stopped walking. "No," he said after a pause. "It's not bad. You're allowed to feel what you feel." She leaned into him. "I'm happy. With you. With Grandma Judith." He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Harrison stood in her doorway and watched her breathe, steady, peaceful, unafraid. He thought about the night she'd asked him about the pills, about how close he'd come to ignoring it, about how easily this story could have ended differently. And he understood something then, with a clarity that chilled him. Some betrayals don't announce themselves with explosions. They arrive quietly, in familiar hands, behind closed doors. And the most dangerous thing you can do is convince yourself that love alone is protection. He turned off the light and closed the door gently. Sophie was safe. This time, he would never look away again. There is a particular kind of quiet that only comes after catastrophe. Not the quiet of peace, not yet, but the stillness that follows when something dangerous has passed close enough to brush your skin, and you are left standing, unharmed but changed. Harrison felt it most in the mornings. The apartment in Lincoln Park woke slowly. Pale light slipped through the floor-to-ceiling windows, touching the edges of furniture, catching dust in the air. Lake Michigan stretched beyond the glass, calm and indifferent, as if nothing terrible had ever happened anywhere in the world. Sophie's bedroom door stayed closed until 7. Always 7. She liked routine now, predictability. It made the day feel safe before it even began. Harrison would stand in the kitchen, coffee cooling in his hands, listening for the sound of her footsteps. Each morning, when he heard them, light, unhurried, alive, something in his chest loosened just a little. 6 months ago, he had learned how fragile normal could be. Now he guarded it fiercely. Sophie emerged rubbing her eyes, hair tied back carelessly, already talking about something she dreamed or a project she needed to finish. She no longer slurred her words. She no longer drifted off mid-sentence. Her mind stayed present, anchored, alive. Harrison watched her the way people watch the ocean after surviving a shipwreck, with awe, gratitude, and an awareness of how close everything had come to ending. They ate breakfast together at the small table by the window. No television, no phones, just quiet conversation and the distant hum of the city waking up. After he walked her to school, Harrison sometimes lingered outside the building, watching until she disappeared through the doors. He knew he didn't need to anymore, but he did anyway, because vigilance had replaced innocence. And he accepted that. Judith came by twice a week, always with groceries or soup or some excuse to help. She never came empty-handed, as if arriving without something to offer might be unforgivable. They rarely spoke about Audrey. The silence around her name felt intentional, protective, as if saying it too often might invite something unwanted back into their lives. When Audrey did come, Once a month, court-ordered, supervised, Sophie returned quieter than usual. Polite, distant, like someone who had already learned the limits of a broken bridge. Harrison never asked questions afterward. He understood that healing didn't always require words. One evening, after Judith had left and Sophie was finishing her homework, Harrison sat across from her sketching designs for work. She paused, studying him. "Dad," she said suddenly, "you don't look scared anymore." The pencil froze between his fingers. "I used to," he asked. She nodded. "Before. When I was sick." Harrison felt the weight of that word settle between them. "I was scared," he admitted, "but I didn't want you to see it." She smiled faintly. "I saw it anyway." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'll always be honest with you now." She seemed to consider that, then nodded, satisfied. Trust, he realized, wasn't restored all at once. It was rebuilt in moments like this, small, quiet, deliberate. At night, after Sophie went to bed, Harrison sometimes replayed everything in his mind. Not obsessively, not with anger, but with clarity. He remembered the first night he'd noticed the silence in the house. The way Sophie had stared at her homework like it was written in another language. The word vitamins written so neatly on that bottle. He thought about how easy it would have been to dismiss it. How tempting it would have been to trust familiarity over instinct. He had almost done it. That knowledge stayed with him like a scar. Not painful anymore, but permanent. Some nights, he stood by the window watching the city lights flicker on, thinking about how many homes looked just like his had once looked. Ordinary, safe, quiet, and how many secrets might be living inside them. The thought didn't make him paranoid. It made him aware. Spring deepened. Trees along the street bloomed fully now, green and alive. Sophie walked lighter. She laughed louder. She argued about bedtime again. A small rebellion Harrison welcomed like a victory. One Saturday afternoon, they walked along the lakefront together. The water reflected the sky in wide sheets of silver and blue. Families passed them, children racing ahead, parents calling after them. Laughter carried on the breeze. They sat on a bench near the pier, watching boats drift lazily in the distance. "Dad," Sophie said, swinging her legs. "Yeah. Do you think some people just forget how to love the right way?" Harrison thought carefully before answering. "I think some people confuse love with wanting," he said, "and when that happens, they stop protecting the things that matter most." She nodded slowly. "You didn't." "No," he said quietly. "I didn't." She leaned against his shoulder, and they stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing. The silence felt different now. Not dangerous. Earned. Later that night, Harrison stood in Sophie's doorway again, just as he often did. She slept peacefully, breathing slow and steady, one arm wrapped around her pillow. No pills, no fog, no fear, just rest. He closed the door softly and walked back into the living room. The apartment hummed gently, pipes settling, wind brushing against the windows, the distant rhythm of the city. Life moving forward. Harrison sat on the couch and allowed himself, for the first time in months, to imagine the future. Not in detail, not with certainty, just with hope. He didn't know what his life would look like 5 years from now. He didn't know if love would ever enter it again in the way it once had. But he knew this. He had listened when it mattered. He had acted when it was terrifying. And because of that, his daughter was safe. Some stories end with triumph. Some end with forgiveness. Some end with revenge. This one ended with vigilance, quiet strength, and a bond forged under pressure and tested by fire. As Harrison turned off the lights and prepared for bed, one final realization settled over him. Heavy, calm, and unshakable. The most important promise he would ever keep wasn't made at an altar. It wasn't written in vows. It wasn't witnessed by anyone else. It was the silent promise he renewed every day he chose to protect his child, even when the danger came from a place he least expected. And this time, he would never look away.